I want to start with the feeling, one you know from the inside, because it lives in the body before it ever reaches the mind. Something crosses your path, an image, an act, an idea, and before you have thought a single word, your lip curls, your stomach tightens. There is a small physical recoil, a pulling back, and notice what happens next. Because it happens so fast, you almost never catch it. You do not simply think that is unpleasant. You think that is wrong. The queasiness in your gut arrives already dressed as a moral verdict. The recoil of the body presents itself as the judgment of the conscience, and you trust it completely because what could feel more certain, more obviously true than that deep bodily no? But here is the unsettling thing I want to spend the next while convincing you of. That feeling, the one that feels like your most reliable moral compass, the one that feels like clarity itself, is one of the least trustworthy guides you possess. It has been wrong about almost everything, over and over, throughout history. And the very reason it is so dangerous is precisely that it feels so much like being right. So, we are going to look at what disgust actually is, where it came from, what it has been used to do, and how to tell the difference between the recoil that is protecting you and the recoil that is about to make you a monster. Let me show you the machine caught in the act. In an experiment that a psychologist named Jonathan Haidt made famous, he gave people a story that was built deliberately as a trap for their reasoning. It describes a brother and sister, both adults, who decide exactly once in private to sleep together. And the story is constructed so that every practical objection is answered before you can raise it. Two forms of contraception, so there is no child and no genetic risk, no pressure, no regret, no damage. They keep it a secret so no one else is ever affected and they never do it again. Every avenue of harm is closed off on purpose by the design of the story. Then Haidt asked people, was that wrong? And the answer came back immediately and overwhelmingly. Yes, obviously, disgusting. So he asked the simple follow up, why? And this is where it got fascinating. People reached for reasons. What about a baby with genetic problems? There is no baby. They used double protection. What about the emotional damage? The story rules it out. One by one, every reason a person offered was already answered by the facts of the story. And here is the crucial part. When they ran out of reasons, they did not change their minds. They did not say, well, I suppose it was fine then. They said, I cannot explain why. I just know it is wrong. Haidt gave that state a name. Moral dumbfounding, absolute certainty that something is wrong combined with the complete inability to say why. And what he argued from this is genuinely disturbing to your sense of yourself as a reasonable creature. The judgment did not come from reasoning. The reasoning came afterward. First, the gut delivered its verdict, a wave of disgust, a flat no. And only then did the rational mind scramble into action, not to reach a conclusion, but to invent justifications for a conclusion that had already been made without it. Haidt's image for this, in his book The Righteous Mind, is that reason in moral life is not the judge. It is the press secretary. It does not decide the policy. It goes out afterward and defends whatever the gut already chose. So if disgust is doing the deciding, we had better understand what disgust actually is and where it comes from. Because it did not evolve to be a moral instrument at all. The world's leading researcher on disgust, a psychologist named Paul Rozin, spent decades tracing it to its root. And the root is food. Disgust began deep in our evolutionary history as a food rejection system. It is the guardian at the gate of the mouth. Its entire original job was to keep you from eating things that would kill you. The rotten, the rancid, the diseased, the contaminated. That curl of the upper lip, the nausea, the urge to expel, is the body's ancient alarm against poison and pathogen. Psychologists call it a behavioral immune system, a set of reflexes that keeps disease at a distance before it can ever get inside you. And because it evolved to fight contamination, it runs on a very particular and very primitive logic. Rozin called it the law of contagion, and its rule is simple: once in contact, always in contact. A single point of contamination taints the entire thing permanently, and no amount of reasoning can clean it. He demonstrated this with an experiment so simple it is almost funny. Take a glass of juice someone wants to drink. Take a cockroach and sterilize it completely so it is medically cleaner than anything else in the room, carrying no disease at all. Dip it briefly in the juice and remove it. Now offer the juice. Almost no one will drink it. You can assure them truthfully that it is perfectly safe. It does not matter. The contamination is not physical anymore. It is psychological, magical, permanent. The essence of roach has entered the juice, and it will never leave no matter what the facts say. Hold on to that because it is the whole problem in miniature. Disgust does not listen to facts. It does not do nuance or evidence or proportion. It operates on contamination and purity. And once something is tagged as contaminated, reason cannot wash the tag off. This is a brilliant design for avoiding cholera. It is a catastrophe as a way of judging the world, and an absolute catastrophe as a way of judging people. Because here is what happened: that ancient food system did not stay in the kitchen. Somewhere along the way, human beings took this powerful, wordless, contamination driven feeling and pointed it at each other. Haidt's research on the foundations of morality found that this sense of purity and pollution became one of the deep pillars of human moral life itself. The sense that some things are pure and some things are polluting, that certain acts and certain people defile whatever they touch. And once you apply the logic of the sterilized cockroach to a human being, something terrible becomes possible. Because now a person or a whole group of people can be experienced not as wrong in what they do, but as contaminated in what they are. Not as guilty, but as filth. And this is where the philosopher Martha Nussbaum makes the argument that should change how you see this feeling forever. In her book on disgust and the law, she asks the deepest question: what is it really that disgusts us most? And her answer is that underneath all of it, what we find most unbearable is our own animal nature. Our bodies and their fluids, their smells, their decay. The soft, leaking, aging, dying animal that each of us actually is. Disgust, at its core, is our recoil from the reminder that we are bodies, that we are mortal, that we will rot. It is our impossible wish to be pure, clean, and immortal. To not be an animal at all. But you cannot escape your own body. So Nussbaum describes the terrible move we make instead. She calls it projective disgust. We take that unbearable disgust at our own animality and mortality, and we project it outward onto some other group of human beings. We designate them as the animal ones, the dirty ones, the bodily, smelly, contaminating ones, so that we, by contrast, can feel clean, elevated, above the flesh. We hide from our own humanity by pinning it onto someone else and then recoiling from them. And once you see that pattern, human history reorganizes itself in front of you into one long, sickening repetition. Because nearly every system of cruelty humans have ever built runs on exactly this engine. The caste system, with its so-called untouchables, an entire class of people defined as inherently polluting, whose very shadow or touch was said to contaminate. The long history of treating women as unclean, their bodies as sources of pollution to be managed and secluded. And in its most murderous form, the propaganda that has always preceded genocide, which reaches without fail for the language of disgust. The targeted group is depicted as vermin, as rats, as insects, as lice, as a disease in the body of the nation. The Nazis did not primarily argue that Jews were bad people who had done wrong things, an argument you could dispute. They portrayed them as contamination, as parasites, as filth to be cleansed. Because once a group has been successfully tagged as disgusting, the ordinary machinery of moral concern switches off. You do not reason with contamination. You do not negotiate with a disease. You eliminate it. Disgust is the emotion that turns a person into a thing, and it is the reliable psychological gateway to atrocity. And notice the crucial difference between disgust and anger, because it is the key to everything. If I am angry at you, I am angry about something. You harmed me. You lied. You took what was mine. Anger makes a claim, and a claim can be examined, argued with, proven right or wrong. You can say to me, no, that is not what happened, and my anger can dissolve. Anger, for all its heat, contains a reason, and so it can be reached by reason. But disgust makes no claim you can argue with. It does not say you did something wrong. It says you are foul. It is not about your actions which could be judged, but about your very being which cannot. There is no counter argument to yuck, and that is exactly what makes it the perfect instrument of dehumanization and the enemy of justice. This is Nussbaum's deepest point about public life. Anger, she argues, rests on reasons that can be publicly stated and publicly examined, which is why, for all its dangers, it can still serve justice. Disgust rests on nothing that can be examined at all, which is why it never can. And if you think this is all history and abstraction, that you personally are far too reasonable to be run by a food reflex, the research has news for you, and it is measurable. In a study led by the psychologist Yuval Barr with David Pizarro and Jonathan Haidt across two samples totaling more than 30,000 people and replicated across 121 countries, one simple trait quietly predicted a whole cluster of moral and political attitudes. How easily a person is disgusted. The more sensitive your disgust on average, the harsher your judgments on questions of purity, and the worrier you are of outsiders and the And let me be careful here, because this is not about one political side being broken. The correlation runs through every one of us, and it says nothing about who is right about anything. But it means something strange and uncomfortable. Part of what you experience as your considered worldview is downstream of how strongly your body does yuck. Researchers have pushed the claim one step further into the moment itself. In a series of well-known experiments, people made moral judgments in a room with a foul smell or at a filthy desk, and their verdicts came back harsher, more condemning, though nothing about the cases had changed. Only the disgust in their bodies had changed. Now, I owe you honesty about that second wave of studies, because I am not going to narrate certainty I do not have. Those experiments are contested. When researchers later pooled every version they could find, the effect was small and some doubt it is really there at all. So hold the bad smell studies loosely. But notice that the finding which stands on solid ground is already unsettling enough. The sternness of your conscience is entangled with the sensitivity of your stomach. The thing you experience as pure moral principle has a body, and the body is not a philosopher. Now, in fairness, I have to give you the other side, because there is a serious counter-argument, and it deserves a real hearing. In 1997, a bioethicist named Leon Kass wrote a famous essay arguing for what he called the wisdom of repugnance. His claim was that sometimes our gut revulsion at things like the cloning of human beings is not a prejudice to be overcome, but a form of deep moral wisdom that runs ahead of our ability to articulate it. That in some cases we intuit the horror of a thing before we can spell out the argument, and that a person who has learned to ignore all repugnance has not become rational. They have become shallow. And Haidt too points out that this disgust based sense of the sacred is not pure poison. It underlies real and precious things. The feeling that a human body is more than meat and deserves reverence. The revulsion at genuine cruelty and degradation. The sense that some things should be held sacred and not violated. A person with zero capacity for disgust would not be liberated. They would be missing something. They would be unable to be appalled by anything at all. So, I am not going to tell you the answer is to feel no disgust. That is neither possible nor desirable. The answer is subtler, and it is the entire point of this. The answer is to demote disgust, to take it out of the judge's chair and put it in the witness box, to stop letting the feeling deliver the verdict and start treating it as one piece of testimony that must then be questioned. And there is a single specific test that does almost all of the work, and Nussbaum's whole argument points straight at it. When you feel that recoil, that wordless certainty that something or someone is wrong, you ask one question: is anyone actually being harmed? Not does this disgust me? Not would I ever do this? Simply, is there a real person being genuinely hurt here? Because harm and disgust feel identical from the inside, that same hot rush of no, but they are completely different things, and learning to pull them apart is most of what moral maturity actually is. When your disgust is tracking real harm, real cruelty, real damage to a real person, then listen to it. It is doing its job. But when you interrogate the feeling and find that nothing is actually being harmed, that the only thing under threat is your own sense of purity, your own comfort, your own recoil from someone who is simply different or foreign or bodily in a way that unsettles you, then history is on its knees begging you not to trust it. In that moment, the disgust is not a moral fact about them. It is only a fact about your own nervous system. So here is the discipline, and it is a hard one, because it means overruling a feeling that screams its own authority. When you catch that curl of the lip and the thought that follows it that is wrong, you translate, you force the wordless yuck to become a sentence. This is wrong because it harms this person in this specific way. If you can complete that sentence honestly, you may well be right, and your disgust is a witness worth hearing. But if you cannot, if you find the sentence has no ending, if the only true version is, this makes me uncomfortable, then you have caught the oldest trick in the human mind in the act. You have felt your food rejection system trying to pass itself off as your conscience. That curl of the lip is one of the most ancient systems inside you, built long before language, built to keep a frightened animal away from a rotting carcass. It does not know what year it is. It does not know about justice or evidence or the dignity of persons. It cannot tell the difference between spoiled meat and a human being who unsettles you. And it will keep offering you its verdict on both with the exact same intoxicating certainty. It will keep arriving disguised as your deepest moral truth. And the quiet work of becoming a good person is, to a surprising degree, the work of learning to feel that recoil and to pause and to ask the question it does not want you to ask. Because almost every atrocity ever committed felt, to the people committing it, like cleaning something dirty. The people who did the worst things in history were very often not the angriest people in the room. They were the ones most certain that something needed to be scrubbed away. So when you feel that certainty rising, that clean and wordless conviction that someone is simply foul, treat it not as your conscience speaking, but as your oldest alarm misfiring. Ask what was actually harmed. And when the honest answer is nothing, nothing but your own comfort, then find the grace to let the person be. If this is the kind of thing you want to keep thinking about, I have written 2 books that go deeper. The Shadow You Carry, about the disowned parts of yourself that you keep meeting in the people who repel you, and On Wanting, about why we chase what we chase and how little of what we want is truly ours. The links are in the description whenever you are ready.